Hi, it's Dwyer, gamblersadvisory.com, dwyervip.com. Remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. Now, there's an article on a great boxing website, boxingnews24.com, by an author, Scott Guilford, where he interviews or quotes Shawn Porter, right, one of my favorite fighters, about who he thinks is going to win the rematch between Leo Santa Cruz and Carl Frampton. And Porter expresses his opinion that he thought that Santa Cruz won the first fight, and that he expects Santa Cruz to win the second fight, right? The second fight is in Las Vegas at the MGM Grand, right? And Guilford, the author, who does boxing pieces, right? He's a boxing guy, says that he felt that Carl Frampton faded in the second half of the first fight, right? And that he feels that Santa Cruz is going to pick up where he left off, right, in the second fight. These guys saw a completely different fight than I saw. I believe the tip-off here that should tell you that Frampton is going to win this fight, in fact, he's going to win it by a bigger margin than he did the first fight, are in the two judges' scorecards who did not have this fight a draw, right? One judge has the fight a draw. There's always that one judge, right? The other two judges had Frampton winning the fight by at least 4 rounds. At least 4 rounds. And so given that there is a volume gap between these two guys, Santa Cruz does throw more punches, right? Given the volume gap, you understand just looking at the scorecards without even seeing the first fight that Frampton was doing something right, right? That Frampton was far more accurate, that Frampton was landing the bigger, more meaningful punches. Now, all of these fighters at the elite levels, right, both of these guys have held the belt, have some technical skills. But we understand that there are guys who are energy guys, and there are guys who are accuracy guys, right, who are more technical, who are more of a technician than their opponents. Now, I understand. People have stopped me places and asked me about this fight. This fight's bigger, I think, than even the promoters know, right? Nobody stops me to ask me about Saul Alvarez against Julio Cesar Chavez Jr., right? Nobody. They stopped me about this fight. Right? Now, I understand I might be in the minority, but in my opinion, especially in immediate rematches, the more technical fighter, the technician, who has gotten by on accuracy and technique, usually beats the energy guy. Right? The energy guy is always convinced that he had an off night, that if he just comes in even more energetic, he can somehow overwhelm the other boxer. What I found, though, is that the technician, during the first fight, has cracked the guy's code. In other words, Carl Frampton, to win that first fight by more than 4 rounds on 2 of the 3 judges' cards, right, looked at Leo Santa Cruz, dissected him, because this is what Frampton does. Let's remember, Frampton once had a fight where he got knocked down twice early, gets off the canvas, then dominates the rest of the fight. Right? Frampton's a guy who's a safe cracker. Right? Frampton figures out the code. You could tell by the increasing accuracy later in the fight. What I want you to do is to look at the CompuBox numbers off the first fight. You're going to find that Frampton's accuracy increases late in the fight. Right? Santa Cruz's volume, his extra energy for the rematch, in my opinion, is going to hurt him. Because he's going to be in there trying to throw even more punches than the more than 100 he threw per round in the first fight. And that's going to create openings that Carl Frampton will be sitting on. Right? For Frampton, it's pattern recognition. Right? He's going to be in there looking for key things. Right? Go through the career of Floyd Mayweather and just look at Mayweather's performances in rematches against people who gave them arguably a test the first time. Right? The Castillo rematch. Mayweather much better than the first time. Right? The Marcus Maidana rematch. Mayweather much better than the first time. I think we're all lucky Mayweather didn't have a Canelo rematch, because even the first fight, if you look at it closely, you're going to notice that after Mayweather dominates early, completely solves Saul Alvarez, he hurts his hand. Right? That's why Mayweather doesn't close the show late in that fight. Could you imagine Mayweather in a rematch with a hand that's not hurt, having already solved Saul Alvarez? Well, Carl Frampton's unbeaten. And to me, the time to surprise Frampton with energy, with something unexpected, is the first fight. Early in the first fight. Folks, we're already 12 rounds in. In my opinion, there is nothing Leo Santa Cruz can do that's going to surprise Carl Frampton. Right? Leo Santa Cruz is not a guy who radically changes styles in fights. Right? He's not flat-footed here, then up on his toes in this fight. No, he's always been. Look at his past CompuBox numbers. He's always been an energetic volume puncher. Right? That had him losing 2 of the 3 scorecards by 4 rounds and more. What's he going to do here? Come out and not be energetic? No, he's going to come out and he's going to try to throw 100 punches around. I also think it's a mistake. Right? Boxers do pace themselves. It's a mistake to look at a Frampton or to look at a DeGale against Andre Durrell and see these guys, after great openings, lose a few rounds in the middle of the fight or toward the tail end of the fight before they mount a comeback. Right? These fighters understand that they have to take their foot off the gas and pace themselves to go through the 12 rounds. I believe when a Carl Frampton is in there and he's cracked the code and he's opened up a lead, he intuitively understands, right? Intuitively understands that there are other rounds left in the fight. And he can't empty his tank in the 6th round. So I believe the Framptons of the world will then take a breather, right? As we say in the trade, take some rounds off, bracing himself for the end of the fight. You knew Frampton had stamina at the end of the fight by the CompuBox numbers and by his accuracy. This is in the middle of a volume storm from Leo Santa Cruz. Let's also revisit the Scott Quigg fight. Sometimes these fights are optical illusions, right? Quigg does do more later in the fight than he did in the early part of the fight. But I want to encourage people to revisit the CompuBox numbers in that fight. It's not like Frampton wilts in that fight. It's just that as you're watching the fight and after Scott Quigg is dominated early in the fight, Scott Quigg does more later in the fight than he did early in the fight. That doesn't mean that he's overwhelming Carl Frampton. Right? The thing with scoring a fight is I could look at a fight and then I could say, you know what? This guy did better this round than he did the last round. That doesn't mean the guy won either round. Right? So I believe the narrative of Frampton fading in fights is unsupported by the CompuBox numbers. The idea that Leo Santa Cruz wasn't in the right state of mind because a family member faced health challenges is unsupported by the number of punches he threw in the first fight. In other words, it would have been different if we're watching the first fight and Santa Cruz is throwing 25 punches around. And then you're thinking, man, this is a guy who on his game is throwing 100 punches around. Something might be wrong with him, right? This isn't the Oliver McCall, Lennox Lewis rematch, right? No, this is different, isn't it? Santa Cruz is throwing 100 punches around in the first fight, right? What's he gonna do differently in the rematch? So, to the folks who've stopped me and said, hey, Frampton, Santa Cruz, right? I've made a video already on this fight. I believe Frampton wins the fight. I believe he does so by an even wider margin than in the first fight. And let's be clear on the first fight, right? 2 of the 3 judges have Frampton winning that fight by at least 4 rounds. In a 12-round fight, that's not a close fight, folks. That's 8-4. Right? Frampton's going to show up here. I'll be surprised if he's not landing the harder punches with more accuracy. Right? I agree that Santa Cruz is probably going to throw more punches than Frampton. But I believe Frampton is going to be the more accurate fighter, throwing the more telling punches. Also, there are folks who want to say, hey, this fight's in America. Right? How could the judges give Frampton the rematch? Folks, the first fight was in America. Right? I know we have a new president, but the country hasn't changed that much from the last fight to this fight. Right? If 2 of the 3 judges gave Frampton the first fight by 4 rounds or more, why am I to believe that in the rematch, as exciting as the first fight was, right, Frampton isn't going to make the case again? I like Carl Frampton here. I think Santa Cruz made a mistake getting the immediate rematch, right? Know when to say when. When the other guy beats you and does so by 4 rounds or more on 2 of the 3 judges' scorecards, and when the other guy is a technician who didn't beat you by lucky punch, it's a structural beatdown over the course of the fight. This isn't a lucky punch. This isn't a bad referee. This isn't a slip called a knockdown. No, this was a methodical beating in the first fight. I like Frampton in the rematch. That's how I see it. I understand one of the Charlo brothers is picking Santa Cruz. I understand Sean Porter is picking Santa Cruz. I understand many of you are picking Santa Cruz. I hope you leave your comments in the comment section to this video, right? Let's talk about why we're favoring one fighter over the other. Thanks for stopping by.